And the Pelethites had gathered their armies for battle, and came together at Succoth, which belongs to Yehudah, and encamped between Succoth and Azekah and Ephes Damim. And Shaul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to meet the Pelethites. And the Pelethites stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. Then the champion came out from the camp of the Pelethites, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 4 amah and a zereth, and a bronze helmet was on his head, and he was armed with a scaled armor, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and bronze shin guards on his legs, and a bronze spear between his shoulders. And the wood of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Israel, and said to them,
Why have you come out to line up to battle? Am I not a Pelethite, and you the servants of Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me, and shall smite me, then we shall be your servants. But if I overcome him, and shall smite him, then you shall be our servants, and serve us. Then the Pelethites said, This day I shall reproach the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight together.
And Shaul and all Israel heard these words of the Pelethites, and they were broken down and in great fear. Now David was the son of that Ephraimite of Bethlehem in Yehudah, whose name was Yeshai, and he had 8 sons. And in the days of Shaul, the man was old among men. And the 3 oldest sons of Yeshai went. They gone to follow Shaul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons, who went to the battle, were Eliab the firstborn, and his second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Shaul. But David went and returned from Shaul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Pelethites drew near, morning and evening, and took his stand. Then Yeshai said to his son David, Please take to your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and take these cheeses to the commander of the 1,000, and see how your brothers are, and bring back news of them. For Shaul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Pelethites. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the herdsmen, and took and went out as Yeshai had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight, and they shouted for the battle. And Israel and the Pelethites drew up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the keeper of the supplies, and ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. And he was speaking with them, and saw the champion of the Pelethite of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Pelethites. And he spoke according to the same words, and David heard. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, ran from him, and were in great fear. And the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who has come up? For he comes up to reproach Israel. And it shall be that the man who smites him, the sovereign is going to enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption in Israel. And David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man who smites this Pelethite, and shall take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Pelethite, that he should reproach the armies of the living Elohim? And the people answered him according to this word, saying, This is what is done for the man who smites him. And Eliab his older brother heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's displeasure burned against David. And he said, Why did you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, Now what have I done? Was it not but a word? And he turned around from him toward another, and said the same word. And these people answered him a word like the first word. And when the words of which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Shaul, and he sent for him. And David said to Shaul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant is going, and shall fight with this Pelethite. And Shaul said to David, you are not able to go against the Philistine to fight against him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of battle from his youth. Then David said to Shaul, Your servant has been tending sheep for his father, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and smote it, and rescued from its mouth. And when it rose against me, I took hold of its beard, and smote it and killed it. Your servant has smitten both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, seeing he has reproached the armies of the living Elohim. And David said, Yahweh who delivered me from the paw of the lion, and from the paw of the bear, he delivers me from the hand of this Philistine. And Shaul said to David, Go, and Yahweh be with you. And Shaul dressed David with his garments, and he put a bronze helmet on his head, and put a coat of armor on him. And David girded his sword over his garments, and began to go, and he had not tried them. Then David said to Shaul, I am not able to go with these, for I have not tried them. So David took them off, and he took his staff in his hand, and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the Wadai, and put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came, and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he despised him, for he was a youth, and tanned and good looking. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his mighty ones. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I give your flesh to the birds of the Shamaim and the beasts of the field. But David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a lance. But I come to you in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom you have reproached. This day Yahweh shall deliver you into my hand, and I shall smite you and take your head from you, and give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines today to the birds of the Shamaim and the wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth know that Elohim is for Israel. And all this assembly know that Yahweh does not save with sword and spear, for the battle belongs to Yahweh, and he shall give you into our hands. And it came to be, when the Philistine arose and came, and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took out a stone, and slung it, and smote the Philistine on his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine and killed him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Yehudah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley, and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the way to Sha'araim, even as far as Goth and Ekron. Then the children of Israel turned back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camps. And David took the head of the Philistine, and brought it into Jerusalem, and he put his weapons in his tent. And when Shaul saw David coming out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your being lives, O sovereign, I do not know. And the sovereign said, Ask whose son this young man is. And when David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Shaul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Shaul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? And David said, The son of your servant Yeshai, the Bethlehemite.